Hello and welcome back to the Richardson Lectures on the challenges of resource management. This time we're looking at the factors affecting food supply. It's important we can explain those factors and to consider how future change will make food supply even more challenging. Now, first of all, as a bit of a recap, food insecurity refers to the lack of a reliable source of nutritious food. And last time we looked at this global map and we can pick out some key trends. We said that in the high-income countries, in Europe, North America and Oceania, we have low levels of food insecurity, that they have good food supplies. And in our low-income countries, in particular in much of Africa, we've got these higher extreme levels of food insecurity. And today, the factors we're going to be looking at that affect food supply are mainly impacting these regions. So we've got a series of factors that affect food supply. The first one is climate, because the climate of an area is fundamental to its ability to produce food. Now, first of all, at areas of high latitude, so far from the equator, they receive significant variations in sunlight throughout the year and are often much colder, and as a result, their food production is often limited. Some parts of the world experience really extremes in temperature and rainfall, which can prevent crop growth and cause damage. So we can have really dry conditions. Of course, we need water for our crops, so dry conditions are not good. But equally, if that water comes too intense, too heavy, perhaps through a tropical storm, we're going to see damage to those crops and livestock. And some parts of the world have significant difference between the seasons. When you get closer to the tropics, we lose the spring, summer, autumn, winter seasons, and there we just focus on a wet season and a dry season. And if you've gone 6-7 months of really dry weather, that's very hard for crop growth, particularly if then in the wet season most of that rain is coming all at once, and as a result can be quite damaging through floods. Another one is technology. Good crop yields often rely on having good technology, and that's why we see this in high-income countries where mechanisation, using tractors and machines, we've actually led to increased food production in these areas, and food production has become much more efficient in those areas. In poorer countries, poor irrigation technology in order to manage water for the land can lead to either flooding, if it's overwatered, or the crops drying out if there's lacking technology to get water to those crops. And again, in high-income countries, we often see the use of chemical fertiliser can dramatically increase crop yields, improve the productivity of the soils, whereas if you can't afford those fertilisers in a low-income country, the soil might be poor, and as a result, over several years it might become incapable of supporting plant growth. Another factor is pests and diseases. Pests and diseases can kill crops and livestock, which of course significantly reduces your food production. Now, in high-income countries, using chemical pesticides and herbicides, they can be managed and killed off in order to allow a good growth of crops and livestock. Whereas in poor countries that can't afford these, we see high levels of pests and diseases damaging crops and livestock. And many of the most harmful diseases are found in the tropical latitudes, which of course limits food production there. So this is an example of the tsetse fly, which affects much of central tropical Africa. And it transmits diseases which have had significant negative impacts on cattle. And as a result, these areas where the tsetse fly is common, cattle production is limited significantly, and so it reduces the ability to produce food in those areas. Another factor is water stress. We've already said that water is really important in terms of crop growth, and having a good, reliable water supply is important for both your crops and livestock. Now, in some dry areas, it might be possible to rear livestock if you're going to allow them to graze and find their water over large areas. But again, it's not that productive, it's not a very efficient method of farming. And some dry areas actually rely on underground aquifers, so these are rocks with pore spaces in them that store water, and they use wells to draw that water up. They can use those to irrigate their land. But often in these areas that are relying on that underground water source, they're being used up faster than they're actually being recharged by rainfall, and as a result they will eventually run out. Conflict, another one that can significantly impact food supply. First of all, the farmland itself could be damaged, sometimes intentionally as a war tactic in a conflict through fighting, so damage to land, damage to livestock, killing off of livestock. But in addition, if farmers themselves are called upon to fight in a conflict or needed in an uprising, a civil war, the farmland left unattended, you're going to have obviously significant lower food production in those years. And lastly, we've got poverty, which links to a few of the previous factors. So the poorest people in the world living in low-income countries cannot afford the technology to farm more efficiently or the chemicals that can improve the soils or keep pests and diseases at bay. And as a result of that, food security is high in those countries. And looking back to that map earlier, we saw it's those countries, mainly in Africa, where we see those highest levels of food insecurity, and it's where we've got those poorest people living. Now we'll just think a little bit about the future, because we know that population is continuing to grow, and so we're going to need more food. However, food production itself may also become more challenging in the future. Here's a couple of reasons why. First of all, urbanisation. We know that an increasing amount of people are moving to the cities, and cities around the world, particularly in the developing countries, are expanding rapidly, and as a result they're taking up land that could be used for farming, and as a result food production and the land available to produce food is decreasing. And another one is climate change. Many parts of the world are predicted to get hotter and drier, reducing food production. If places are experiencing longer periods of drought, it's going to make growing crops and rural livestock more challenging. And as a result of more areas becoming warmer, those tropical diseases, which currently are focused around the equator and the tropics, could expand further north and south, affecting farming there. And also, as a result of ice cap melting and sea level rise, land is going to be lost, and that's more land that we're losing that could be used for farming. And we'll just finish off by looking at an example of exam question, just a short one on this specific topic. And it's just a 2-marker that says outline one reason why some countries have a limited food supply. It's only 2 marks, but it only says one reason, so we're not going to get marked 2 separate marks here. You could get a mark for a basic statement, things such as some countries are poor, when there is conflict or war, that some countries are dry. Any of the factors we've looked at today could be listed here as reasons why some countries have a limited food supply. But it's an outline question, it means you want to develop that point to get the 2nd mark, so you should be really developing them. So we could have said some countries are poor, so they're unable to buy technology to improve food production, or when there is conflict or war, food supplies can't get through, or the farmland itself could be destroyed. So make sure you're developing that point to get the 2nd mark, not leaving it just to a very brief answer. Okay, that's it for this video. Next time we're looking at the impacts of food insecurity.